Hey everybody, Anthony here from Crazy Tech Lab. I hope you're all doing okay out there today, and we have a great video for you because we are checking out the brand new Thermaltake Tower 200. So this is a new mini-ITX case from Thermaltake. We've already looked at the Tower 100 a few months ago, and a lot of you seem pretty interested in that case. I've seen lots of builds with that case out there in the wild. It was pretty funky, it's very unique, not the smallest of cases, and this one, the Tower 200, as you might suspect, is a little bit larger. It's still mini-ITX, but we have more space inside for fans, we have more space for liquid coolers, and we have some more space for graphics cards. So still sporting that really funky design with a large front window so you can see all your hardware. Obviously, a lot of other cases don't give you that option because they just don't have the same layout as this case. You get extra cooling space inside as well. So what we're going to be doing is checking out this case, making some comparisons between it and the smaller Tower 100 that we looked at a few months ago. And if you want to see a review for that case, you can see it in a banner up above right now. And then we're going to be doing a walk around, looking at some of the features, how you actually build a PC inside, just checking it out, really doing an unboxing section. And then we're going to be doing some thermal results and coming to some conclusions at the end. First though, a huge thanks to Thermaltake for sending over the case. I would also like you to like and comment on this video. It means a lot to have your support, and all those likes and comments just mean that I get punched through the algorithm and my videos get noticed. So please take the time to like and comment. It means a lot, as does you clicking on the subscribe button. You will be notified if you click on the notification bell button when I upload new videos. So that's a really cool feature, to be notified when I upload some cool new videos. And subscribing to my channel just means, again, that you're showing your support for Crazy Tech Lab. So final word then is from my sponsor, and here's their message now. Our sponsor today is scdkey.com, where right now you can get great deals on software such as Windows 10, Windows 11 and Microsoft Office. And even better is I've got a 25% discount code to share with you guys. Windows 10 Professional, for example, which is fully upgradable for free to Windows 11. All you have to do is click Buy Now, enter the code CRT25 into the promotion code box, click apply, and the US price will drop from $22.09 down to just $16.57, and in the UK you'll see the price fall to just £12.79. Once you've paid, head over to your order page, click the Get Key button and copy your Windows key code. When you're in Windows, you want to move your mouse over to the Start button, right click, go to Settings, then Update and Security, and then move up to Activation, and finally click on Change Your Product Key, copy and paste your brand new product key into the box, click Next, then click Activate, and your Windows 10 installation is now activated. You can do the exact same thing with Office 2021 Professional, CRT 25, click Apply, and you will see a hefty discount. Thanks again to SCDKey for sponsoring today's video. So I thought first we would run through the specifications to see how the two cases differ, because I don't think you'd really be considering many other cases out there if you had your eye on either the Tower 100 or the 200, because they're pretty large for mini-ITX cases, but they obviously have some very, very unique features. So we'll bring up the specifications box, and we can take a look at some of those specifications now. So starting with the dimensions, and as we can see, the Tower 200 is noticeably larger. It's about 3 inches taller, about an inch or so taller, and about half an inch wider. So a noticeably larger case. It's also heavier, at around nearly 2 kilos heavier, or 3 or 4 pounds heavier, as a result of all that extra metal in there. And we'll quickly move on to the cooling system down here, and you get two 140mm fans included with the Tower 200, whereas you only get two 120mm fans included with the Tower 100. That's not the limit of the cooling though, because we'll just move down to the fan support, and as you can see, things are much beefier with the Tower 200. The top fans are pretty much the same. You can fit either a single 120 or 140mm fan in both Tower 100 and Tower 200. On the right side, or essentially the rear of the case, there's much more flexibility going on with the Tower 200. So you can fit two 120mm fans or two 140mm fans here. And if we flick over to the Tower 100 over this side, you're just looking at single fan options. So you can still fit 140mm fans there, but only singles. So then if we go to the power supply cover, that's kind of on the rear of the case. We've got a similar configuration here, just a single 120 or 140mm fan. So if we go down to the radiator support, as we can see, the top can support one 140mm or 120mm radiator in the Tower 200, whereas you are limited to 120mm fan options in the Tower 100. Now, the biggest difference here, obviously, with those multiple fan supports, is you can sit a double 120mm radiator or 240mm radiator, or even 280mm radiator in the side panel of the Tower 200. And if we just flick up, we can actually see how the liquid cooling is kind of supported in these two cases. So in the Tower 200, you get the option of having a roof AIO liquid cooler, but you also have the option of a double fan or 240 or 280mm radiator AIO liquid cooler in the side panel. You can't do that in the Tower 100. You can only fit an AIO liquid cooler in the roof. So that's pretty interesting because it means that there's a lot more cooling options with the Tower 200. If you want to fit that dual fan AIO liquid cooler or even custom liquid cooling, it's going to be a lot more viable in the Tower 200. So what we'll do now is just have a quick flick through the rest of the specifications, and then we'll move on to the unboxing and checking the actual thing out. So drive bays, in the new case, you've got two hard disk slots and two 2.5-inch SSD slots, or if you've just got a bunch of 2.5-inch SSDs, you can fit 4 of those. And in the older case, you've got just the option of you've probably got 4 drive bays for 2.5-inch SSDs. You've also got the option of 2 hard disks or using 2 SSDs, or that's the 2.5-inch SSDs, and you don't have to remove any rear fans or anything like that. All of these fit within the case as it is. Another big difference is the graphics card support. You get options for triple slot graphics cards, whereas in the Tower 100 you could only have 2 expansion slots, or graphics cards that would fit with 2 expansion slots. Now, if we go for the clearances, the CPU cooler height has risen from 190 to 200mm, but to be honest, that's not really going to make that much difference because I don't think there are many coolers that stretch much beyond 165mm. But the graphics card support is now sitting at 380mm without the power cover there, so that rises from 330mm, and you've obviously got a much deeper area to play with as well with the triple slot graphics card support. So that's all really interesting. So bigger graphics cards, more space for AIO liquid coolers, and more fan mounts in the new case basically. So let's crack on with the unboxing. So here we are with the Tower 200 then, and what we're going to do is have a quick walk around to see what you actually get in the box. So starting with the front panel, you get a pair of USB 3 ports, all nicely labelled there, and then you also get a Type-C port, plus dual audio jacks. You get a reset button as well, and that's fairly recessed in there, so you're not going to be hitting that by accident unless you deliberately poke it basically. Then you've got the power button on the end, so it's kind of a nice front panel. I like the way it's really clean. The only downside is that if that is sitting on your desk, that's quite a long way up. I think I might have preferred Thermaltake to have something down here that's a little bit easier, because this is the kind of case that you probably won't want sitting on your floor. You kind of want it having it on your desk, and unless you're kind of happy to just stand up and plug all your components in, it's just going to mean that you won't be able to do that if you're sitting down at your desk. Like if I was sitting at this desk here, I'd probably be kind of sitting around here, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to get all the way up there without standing up and getting to it. So that's maybe just about possible on the Tower 100 because it's a little bit shorter, coming to around here or so, but it's just not it's just a little bit too far away for my liking. So yeah, it's that's just one small downside to this case. There is also the option down here of having a an LCD panel, so a customizable LCD panel. That's one option, but obviously not included on the case that we're looking at today, but it does look kind of funky from Thermaltake's videos, and you can just see just how much mesh there is on this thing. It's just kind of all the way around, so airflow is definitely not going to be a problem, but obviously out of the box you only get 2 fans, and that could well be an issue out of the box, so we're going to be seeing how well it does. And if you're wondering where that second fan is, it's actually round the back, so it's kind of acting as an exhaust, and in fact I think both fans are acting as an exhaust. So you've got the large 140mm fan up there and another one down the back. You might just be able to see it poking through down there. So now something that was immediately obvious was this front panel here. It does tend to rattle a little bit because it's only got one push clip in the center. I think you can probably just about see that if I tip the case forwards a bit maybe. Yeah, it's only got one push pin there, and the rest of these pins here just kind of rest inside holes in the case, and they're not held particularly firmly. So if I was going to be cramming this thing full of fans and that kind of stuff, I'll be slightly worried about vibration, because I can quite easily make that panel rattle there. So that's just one area of concern. I think what Thermaltake should have done really is had some like material pads or something just kind of sitting there. It does feel like there are actually pads, but they're not thick enough. They're not actually thick enough to make proper contact. If I just whip this panel off, you'll see what I'm talking about. So Thermaltake has actually thought about that, but I don't think these pads are thick enough, because I can still make it rattle quite a bit, and it's got more down here as well. So we'll have to see what happens when we get the system built and we start churning our graphics cards through some games and that kind of stuff. But overall, it's really easy to get into. Though you just pop the front panel off, focusing on pressing on the middle, because as you see, pressing on the sides doesn't really do anything because there are no poppers there. So pressing on the middle, and then the panel just comes straight off. And that's one of the things that I love about this case is that it's super easy to work with. So what we do now is just open up the top panel to get inside, and then again that just pops off like that. And if we have a look here, there is a dust filter, but you'll have to kind of remove this because it's I'm pretty sure that's fixed or glued on or something. So yeah, it's a super large dust filter though, and it's a nice mesh as well. It's very fine, but there are big gaps between those holes, so hopefully we won't see our graphics card being starved of air like it was in the Corsair 2000D. So we've got lots of panels down here. Now I'm having to remind myself how you actually remove a lot of these. I think there's a thumb screw under there, and I think you need to, I'm just remembering how I actually got these panels off with the Tower 100. So there's lots of different ways to do that, but I think the start is probably going to need a screwdriver, which I will get in a second. So again, here another dust filter. Removable this time, and you can see super large holes punched in there. It's not a hexagonal design, which is what I would have preferred, because that's just more efficient. If they're just circles, it means that it's not as efficient in letting airflow through. And here we've obviously got the hexagonal design, which is much more efficient at letting air through. So it's a shame that the same principle wasn't applied to the dust filter, but I'm guessing it's probably more expensive to do that. So what we'll do now is I'm going to go off camera, remove these panels, and we'll be back in a second. Okay, so we are back, and I wanted to try and show you guys just what you actually have to do to remove the rest of the panels. So I just needed to remove the bottom ones, which are just held on by thumb screws. So we've got rid of those. There's another one that we can remove here, but we'll do that in a minute. So to get the side panels off, what you actually need to do is pop the top section off as well. I'm not sure whether I would change that if I was to design this case myself, because it just kind of feels like you need to just completely dismantle this case to kind of actually get at the interior. Obviously, you don't actually need to remove these side panels to actually install a PC, because your motherboard would go there, graphics card over this side, and then you've got your AIO liquid cooler perhaps up here. So you don't actually need to do that to remove everything. Obviously you would do if you wanted the AIO liquid cooler here, but for the core hardware you don't generally need to remove the panels. But to start with, we will do that. So we're going to pop off the top panel, which is thankfully super easy to remove. And then the side panels come off really, really easily. You know, they just pop off like that. So you're not really having to deal with a whole load of stuff, and all of this will take probably 30 seconds to remove everything. And then you end up with a big pile of panels. So if we take a look at the top section, we've got the exposed front panel there, obviously, and then we've got the roof fan. We've then got like a whole bunch of cables that we need to plug in, but there's nothing here that's sort of out of the ordinary. Something that I've spotted up here is another fan, 4-pin PWM cable down there, so you can daisy chain your fans. And then we've got more daisy chaining going on down here, so it's kind of nice to see that from Thermaltake. And if we go around the back, we obviously need to get the back panel off, and we have the rear 140mm fan, and obviously in the previous case I mentioned that it would be possible to fit a radiator here. So what we're going to be checking out in a minute is whether or not we can remove this panel, remove this fan here, and maybe have a slim radiator placed in there as well. So that would give the option of 2 large radiators in this case. Obviously there's very little clearance here, so we are going to check that out in a minute, because I know that was something that a lot of you were kind of interested in my video of the Tower 100, was that you could actually fit a radiator in the back here using a slim fan and a slim radiator. So we'll check that out in a minute as well. So let's get this panel removed again, and we can see what actually goes on. And then we've obviously got ATX power supply support. No need for SFX power supplies in this case. I believe Thermaltake does make SFX power supplies, but there's no real reason to do that in here. Obviously Thermaltake could have saved quite a bit of space down the bottom here if it had gone for SFX power supplies, but you don't really need to if you've got a case this size. It's like what's a case that's you know, sort of 20 inches tall versus 19 inches. You know, it's not really, there's no real point. Now something that is pretty interesting is the power supply mounting. So we've got that down here, which means that your kettle lead is just simply going to run out the back of the case. So as we saw in Corsair's case, the 2000D, which isn't actually that much smaller than this, the power supply was running around the outside, or the power supply cable was running around the outside of the case, which just looks horrible. And this is the kind of thing that I was talking about Corsair maybe doing down here, just having some internal connectors and cable tidying things just going on, just to make things a bit easier. So it's kind of great seeing Thermaltake actually doing this, and these are some pretty good cable ties actually. I really like these things because they kind of hook in to the chassis. As you can see here, they're super easy to use and really easy to kind of lock into place. Not seen these used that often actually, but they kind of click into place like that, and they're really strong as well, so they're going to hold your cables in there. So we're going to build a PC in here in a minute, but not before we go through everything else. So we've got your hard disks and SSD mounts up here, loads of cable routing holes for all your hardware, and the second fan, I should add, has also got a splitter, or not splitter, just like a daisy chainable connector there if you wanted to add more fans. So if we go round to the side of the case, what you've got here, I believe, is a graphics card. I would say anti-sag, but your graphics card is actually mounted vertically in this case, so it doesn't really need that. But what it will allow you to do is just kind of, if I can actually get this thing moving, what it will allow you to do is just kind of secure your graphics card in place. So if you're using something fairly large and you want to kind of take your case out and move it around and that kind of stuff, you can actually adjust this thing to secure your graphics card in place. So because of the way that the motherboard is mounted, you don't need a PCIe riser, despite the fact that the graphics card isn't mounted in the usual way. We've got some blanking covers and all those kind of things in the accessory pack down there, which we'll probably look at that very briefly later. And obviously on this side is the second double fan mount in this case. We had one on the rear of the case, which we're going to look at in a minute. And here we have the AIO liquid cooler mount. So we've got a removable mount as well, so you can actually remove this thing, just unscrew the screws there, and then it just pops out of its place. Now, with your motherboard in place, we will get a motherboard in a minute and have a look and see what's actually going on. You have quite a bit of clearance here. So your motherboard is obviously going to sit there, and we'll fit one in a minute, and then you'll see that the motherboard has actually got a good like 2 or 3 inches between there and the panels. So what I'm hoping is that there is pretty much zero limitation on perhaps using like a 60mm radiator and a single or double row of fans if you want to, with some really awesome cooling capacity. So that's going to be an interesting thing to look at in a minute once we get some radiators out and see what you can actually fit in here. And if we just flip it up, you'll see up the top there you have triple slot graphics card support, and there's loads of space on the side as well. So I'm hoping that this is going to fit the monster palette GameRock 4090 that we've got, that I use for testing cases. So if that fits in here, then I think pretty much anything will. So great graphics card support from this case, much improved cooling capacity in terms of radiators and liquid cooling with this compared to the Tower 100. So it's shaping up to be a pretty awesome but rather large mini-ITX case. So I have some really, really good news for anyone that is looking to build a custom liquid loop in this PC, because we have a slim 120mm radiator, we have a slim 120mm fan, and we have an angled 90-degree fitting down here. And look what happens when I try and fit it on this side panel. Everything goes on completely snug, no bulging panel or anything like that, and it all fits. So that is absolutely amazing news for anyone that's looking to liquid cool this case. As you can see, you can fully rotate the fitting down there, so you can have your tubing running down to your graphics card or up over the top to the processor or something. And this is absolutely awesome. There's even a good centimeter or so, good 10mm of clearance between the fan and the panel here. You can actually see that I can run my finger down there. So the great thing is, it doesn't actually matter what size radiator you use here. You could use a double or 280mm radiator in there, a slim radiator. Alphacool does those, or you can use the XSPC ones. They only go up to 240mm, I believe, that would actually fit inside this case. But that basically doubles the cooling capacity that you can actually fit in here. So I'm really glad that this is the case. Obviously, we saw last time that you could fit a single 140 or 120mm slim radiator and fan combo here, but this time you can fit a lot more cooling. So in theory, you could actually have two 280mm radiators in this case, and that's pretty awesome. And that's kind of what you want from a very large mini-ITX case. You want the extra cooling capacity. So if you want to boost your cooling, then definitely go for a slim radiator setup in the back. It probably won't look amazing. You'll probably have to use flexible tubing to actually get around in here. You might be able to do it hardline, but it might be a bit tricky. So, but anyway, it's really great news that we can actually fit that in this case, and with no modding required whatsoever. So what we're going to do now is just quickly put a motherboard in this case, and we'll probably just build a quick PC in here just to see what goes where and what the other clearances are like. So we have a quick little system build here, and it's a pretty awesome system though. We've got the Asus ROG Strix X670EI Gaming Wi-Fi AMD motherboard, and we've got a Ryzen 9 7950 X3D in there, along with 32GB of T-Force 6000 megahertz memory. And I've picked that for a reason, because it's pretty much the tallest modules that I've got, so I wanted to see what the worst case scenario was in terms of clearance. And we've also got the mighty palette GameRock RTX 4090 in the side here as well. So that's an absolutely monster graphics card. It's more than 3 slots, absolutely huge, and it fits in here with room to spare. And we've even managed to get the graphics card support mounted down the side, so the graphics card isn't going anywhere. And if we swing around this way, what I wanted to check is the clearance of the backplate on this graphics card. It just about fits, but you're not going to find a graphics card with a bigger backplate than this one. It's absolutely huge. So should be absolutely fine even with the largest graphics cards out there. And as you can see, even more space available on the width. There's a good inch or so there, and we've got even more length available as well. So if you check out the Palette Game Rock RTX 4090 and your graphics card is smaller than this one, or even a little bit bigger in terms of width, depth, and length, you're probably going to be fine in fitting that graphics card in this case. So what I wanted to do now is check out some radiator support on the side panels. Now I've got an AlphaCool Slim 280mm radiator here, and this one fits absolutely fine in the side panel. So obviously with this radiator you could fit standard height fans. You don't have to use slim fans here because there's plenty of room. You could even use a double row of them. But the problem is with this one and the larger 280mm radiator that I'll get in a minute, the standard height one, the roof fan becomes a problem. So the ports are just not going to allow for any more depth than that. And if I remove that one and try and fit an XSPC full height 280mm radiator here, this thing is just not even going to go in with that fan mounted up above. If you remove the fan, then yeah, you'll just about have enough room to mount this radiator, and that's an absolute beast of a radiator as well. So combined with the slim 280 in the rear, that's enough cooling to pretty much deal with anything here. Even if we water cooled the hardware that we've got here, a 4090 and a flagship CPU, you're still going to have more than enough cooling capacity to deal with that hardware with that kind of radiator setup. So pretty awesome news here. And obviously if we have AIO liquid coolers, they are going to fit in here no problem. Either 280mm or 240mm, you've essentially got unlimited clearance. So that's some pretty awesome news for this case. So what we will do now is install our test hardware, get some thermal results, and we can come to some conclusions at the end, but not before running through a few things that I love about this case and a few things that I don't like so much about it. So the first thing I really like about this case is the graphics card support, and there are a few reasons for this. Number one, there's plenty of space for housing very, very large graphics cards in here. This is one of the biggest I've ever seen in the Palette Game Rock RTX 4090. It's absolutely huge, well beyond 3 slots, and very, very long and very, very deep, of course, with a massive backplate. No problems here installing this graphics card into this case. And if you've got something smaller, then in the box you get a cover that actually sits over this panel here, so it just kind of hides the bottom of the case if you don't have something particularly large like this graphics card to house in there. So you can actually sit this panel over the top. You can see there are some screws here over there. Slide it in place and it keeps the inside of the case looking all nice and neat. Something else I really like about the Tower 200 are the cable tidying clips. So these things are really strong, and you're going to be able to fit a whole bunch of cables down the side, and you have them in both sides of the panel as well, which is really cool. So you can actually hide all of your cables in the rear of the case here, out of sight, so you won't be able to see them looking through that gorgeous front panel. And finally then, we have my last thing that I love about this case, and that is the gorgeous front panel that we've got here. Great view of all your hardware on the inside, especially if you have an AIO liquid cooler with RGB fans down there. It's going to look absolutely great, and it's super easy to remove as well. So not only do you get a great view of your hardware, but if you need to tweak something in here, the panel is removable super easily. And if your PC is on your desk, you can get inside it within a matter of seconds, which is super easy for swapping out memory, M.2 SSDs and the like. Now we have a few things that I'm not too keen on with the Tower 200. First of all, while the front panel gives a great view of your case, it's not very secure in its mount. You can rattle it quite easily, and depending on what hardware you have inside, especially if you have a really powerful CPU cooler or something like that, there is the potential for vibration to be happening here. And unfortunately, the pads that Thermaltake has installed on this panel aren't enough to completely stop that. Now we're going to check out later whether that is a problem or not, but it's just something that I wouldn't have liked to have seen there in the first place. Now, something else I would have liked to have seen from Thermaltake is better use of the base of this case. There is a huge area down here that is pretty much redundant. You might be able to use the LCD optional display down here, but even then that's not really going to encroach on this area, and I just feel that Thermaltake could have made much better use of this, especially as the top panel, as we look around here, is actually vented. That top panel just below the motherboard there is vented, so you could well have fans installed down here or radiators and that kind of stuff. It's just, I don't like seeing wasted space, and it's almost as if this area down here has been completely forgotten by Thermaltake. I would just like to have seen a couple of fan mounts, because there's plenty of space down here for fans and radiators. So the final thing I'm not too keen on with the Tower 200 is the location of the front panel. There's nothing wrong with the actual features here. I think it's very clean. I think it actually looks quite nice. You get Type-C and USB 3.0 ports as well, so there's nothing I would really change about that other than its location. If you're sitting at your desk over here typing on your keyboard, that front panel it might as well be in a different room, because it's so high off your desk. You're going to have to stand up and reach over every time you want to turn your PC on, you want to reset it, plug in a headphone or microphone, or use any of the USB ports. So I just feel like that would be much better placed down here, or even on one of the side of the case, or one of the sides of the case, perhaps with a flippable panel that you could swap to the other side, depending on whether the case is actually sitting on the left side or the right side of your case. So just something to think about for Thermaltake there. So something else I wanted to mention is micro-ATX compatibility. So what we've got here is a micro-ATX motherboard installed in this case. It does fit. You can install your graphics card as well. The only downsides that you're going to have is that a lot of the cable routing holes and ventilation holes are going to be blocked, because we're obviously got a much larger PCB here. So the cable tidying is going to be a little bit hampered. However, there are some more serious issues when you install a micro-ATX motherboard. Specifically, if you have any angled ports down here that are set at right angles, they are going to foul the graphics card support and or the PSU cover down here. Now, a lot will depend on your actual motherboard as to how bad that is. Now, with this motherboard, we pretty much just lose 2 of the SATA ports down here, but we do have 4 more down the side here. And if I just zoom in a little bit, we've also got the USB 3 connector down here as well, so we can use that pretty easily. But that's going to be the issue with a lot of micro-ATX motherboards, is if you've got the USB 3 connector down here and it's angled at right angles, you're pretty much not going to be able to use it. So it's going to depend on where it is. But if that connector is along here somewhere, you're not going to be able to get that connector in unless you can kind of force it through one of these cable routing holes down here. You're not going to be able to fit it in. So I don't want to say that all micro-ATX motherboards will have this problem, because they won't. I can quite easily use this one minus a couple of SATA ports, but not all micro-ATX motherboards will be fine in this case. So just bear that in mind. Look at where your ports are on your chosen motherboard, or the motherboard that you're thinking of buying for this case, micro-ATX, and just make that call yourself. But just bear in mind that it's not a straight fit. It's why Thermaltake is not listing micro-ATX as being compatible, because in some cases it won't be. It would depend on the actual motherboard that you're using. Mini-ITX, you're absolutely fine, and obviously mini-DTX as well with the Asus Impact motherboard for socket AM4, that will also be fine, but it's just micro-ATX motherboards that you will probably have some issues with. So the first 2 graphs we've got here and the thermal tests are the game test results. So obviously the CPU not being under a great deal of load here. We'll get to that in the bottom graph. But with the GPU temperature, Thermaltake Tower 200 doing pretty well. It's got the coolest result out of the other two cases that we're looking at, which are the Corsair 2000D and the SUPD Meshlicious. But neither of those cases actually come with fans, so I've added a couple of fans into those cases to get some results, because obviously there's no point testing it without fans, because you wouldn't run either of those cases without fans. Both cases also kind of focused on AIO liquid coolers. I've seen plenty of Meshliciouses out there with low profile coolers, but way more with AIO liquid coolers really. So take these results with a pinch of salt. It's probably not indicative of how you would use them, but I always test with a low profile cooler with mini-ITX systems, because that's just what a lot of people use with them. It means that I can use the same hardware between cases and get comparable results. So it is what it is for now. So obviously GPU temperature, Thermaltake Tower 200 doing very, very well. Not so well in the CPU temperature, sorry, and that's primarily because the fan that's in the roof isn't pointing directly at the cooler. And low profile coolers that, you know, the sort of top down design with a fan on top, they generally benefit from a case fan being pointed at them, which is happening in most of the other lower results. So again, don't read too much into that. It's just a case of the other systems being able to benefit a low profile air cooler. Obviously you can't do that in the Tower 200 because the panel opposite the CPU cooler is made of glass and there's no fan mounts in it. So moving on to the final test though, and here we've actually got a slightly better result. So this is the CPU load temperature, and here after a while, I'm guessing the other cases just kind of heat up. They're not able to deal with the heat, and with the two much larger fans in the Thermaltake Tower Tower 200, it's just enough to kind of keep that higher load on the CPU just a little bit cooler. There's just a few degrees of benefit here over the Meshlicious, and pretty much the same with the best result for the Corsair 2000D as well. So kind of an interesting result there, that the Thermaltake goes from sort of not doing too well to slightly better when the CPU is under more load. But yeah, just is what it is. There isn't really anything else there other than getting more heat out of the case. The case will heat up over time, and with the second test, there's more heat to be dumped into the case. So even though the benchmark was pretty much the same length, there was a lot more heat being dumped into the case with the final test. So there we go. So what do we make of Thermaltake's Tower 200 then? Well, I think Thermaltake has done a pretty good job of expanding the dimensions of the smaller Tower 100, so the case is now much more flexible when it comes to housing massive graphics cards like this Palette GameRock RTX 4090. This thing is more than triple slot deep. It is very, very long, well over 12-13 inches, and it's very thick as well, and it also has a massive backplate. So cards like this will fit in absolutely no problem. Obviously, there might be something out there that's absolutely enormous even compared to this card that you might struggle, so don't forget to check those specifications. But overall here, there won't be many graphics cards, if at all, that will struggle to fit into this case. It's also much more flexible when it comes to cooling. So you can obviously fit large air coolers. You could do that in the last case as well. But with liquid cooling, especially AIO liquid coolers, you've got space for either 240 or 280 millimeter liquid coolers in the side here. When it comes to custom liquid cooling, the case is even better than the Tower 100, because we can not only fit 240 and 280 millimeter rads in the side here, we can also fit slim 240 and 280 millimeter rads and slim fans in the back section as well. So you could potentially have two 280 millimeter radiators in this case, which is more than enough to water cool very high-end hardware such as a Ryzen 9 7950 X3D or Core i9 13900K and a 4090 as well. So plenty of water cooling potential here, which is kind of what you'd expect given a case of this size. And that's something that I think Thermaltake could maybe improve on in future, is the liquid cooling capacity in this case. Just a little bit of extra depth will allow for normal water cooling components to be used in the back rather than slim fans and slim radiators and all that kind of stuff. So It's not a small case though, and you're not buying a Tower 200 or 100 for a compact mini-ITX case. That's not what they're about. They're all about this massive front window with a great view of your hardware to really turn heads. And I've seen some really great looking systems out there using the Tower 100, and I'm hoping for more of the same with the Tower 200 as well. So there are a few things that I'm not too keen on. I think Thermaltake should be looking at moving the front panel down somewhere, just because if this case is sitting on your desk, it's a little bit difficult to reach, that kind of thing. There isn't really that much else though that I would change about this case. Yes, you get micro-ATX motherboard support, which is okay, but for reasons that, that are pretty obvious now, Thermaltake doesn't list micro-ATX compatibility with this case, because with some motherboards, mainly those with right-angled connectors on the side of the motherboard, they are going to struggle to be accessible once you install the motherboard into this case. That's why it specifies mini-ITX compatibility only, but you can fit some micro-ATX motherboards in this case. It just depends on where those ports are and how many ports you're willing to lose. Now, as far as pricing goes, I've been told that this case is going to retail for $130. I think it's actually already available in certain places. So $130 and around £110 here in the UK. So it's fairly reasonable. You do get 2 fans out of the box as well. So you don't really need to add that many fans to get decent cooling, if at all. If you've got a decent air cooler, that should be enough. And obviously your graphics card is going to be drawing air in through the side panel. So you don't really need to worry too much about that either. So in terms of cooling, things were pretty decent, apart from the CPU cooling, but we can't really read too much into that because I was using a low profile air cooler to be compatible with other cases that I've tested recently, whereas this isn't really, you wouldn't really want to put a low profile air cooler into this case. Maybe some sort of top down cooler if it's quite large, because obviously you'd be silly to put a low profile air cooler into this case. That's just not what it's about. It's about maximizing CPU cooler height, getting large graphics cards in there and adding a few more fans and liquid coolers and all that kind of stuff. So with all that in mind, I think it's a pretty good case, especially if you like the Tower 100 but you wanted to cram a bit more cooling inside and have a larger graphics card. So that's it from me today. I'd like to thank Thermaltake for sending over the sample. Don't forget to like and comment below. Let me know what you think about this case. Do you own the Tower 100? Are you thinking about buying this, or do you just prefer something smaller when it comes to mini-ITX? Maybe you're thinking of putting a micro-ATX motherboard into this micro-ATX motherboard into this case, should I say. So don't forget to like and comment, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel as well. It means a lot to have your support. And also don't forget to turn on the notifications by pressing the bell icon so you are notified when I upload new videos, because you don't want to miss some of the stuff that I've got coming up. So that's it from me today. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you soon.